Good morning, Jerusalem.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to Good Morning, Jerusalem. And I am your host, Miranda Witt. Today we are proud to present the long-awaited event of the season. On our program today, you will meet some of the most famous guests we've ever had on our show. Let's begin today's show by welcoming someone we all know and love as a father and friend, Abraham. Abraham has come all the way from Canaan to be with us today. Abraham, you are quite a traveler. You must be tired from your long trip. How did you get here today?
I got here by riding a donkey. It was also very hot and dusty on the road.
After you were settled in Haran as a shepherd, what did God ask you to do?
God asked me to leave everything, such as my family and my home and my country. It was very hard, but I trusted God.
How did you feel about it?
Well, I did not fully understand at first, but He told me to obey them right away, so I did.
What difficulties did you experience during your journey and in the beginning of your stay in Canaan?
It was very difficult to haul all the tents and food, and not to mention the robbers that could pop out. This was not only a physical journey, but a spiritual one too.
Was it easy to trust God on your long journey?
No, not at first at least, but He provided for me, so it got easier as I went on.
What was the hardest thing God asked you to do?
The hardest thing God asked me to do was give up my only son Isaac. I was very sad and couldn't imagine what Isaac would do when I told him, but God stopped me and told me He was pleased, so He replaced my son with a ram.
We've heard that God made some very great promises to you. Would you like to share them with us now?
One of the promises He told me was to go outside and look up at the stars, and that is how many descendants I would have.
How can we live the spirit of faith?
We can live the spirit of faith by trusting God and always knowing that He will provide for us.
Thank you, Abraham. Next, we are privileged to have as our guest Isaac, Abraham's son. We are so happy he was able to accompany his father on the journey. Isaac, we know your father Abraham struggled with the idea of suffering you as a sacrifice to God. What were your thoughts that day as you gathered firewood and built the altar?
I thought that he was going to sacrifice like an animal, but no.
How did you feel when you discovered that you were to be the sacrifice?
I was scared.
How did God reward your father's trust?
He let me live and gave him a ram instead.
What was the greatest gift from your father that you can share with us today?
He taught me his faith. So, his faith.
Thank you, Isaac. This guest will tell you to believe in your dreams. He is none other than Joseph, the young man sold into slavery in Egypt, where he went on to become the second highest court official. Joseph, you have lived quite a full, adventurous life. How did you feel when your brothers sold you into slavery?
Well, I felt betrayed, but I knew that God would provide for me.
Why were you imprisoned in Egypt?
Potiphar thought that I wanted to marry his wife.
How did you become known as an interpreter of dreams?
There was two people, and they had these dreams, and they wondered what they meant. So they asked me, and I told them what they meant. And then, later, what I said actually happened.
What did you do to save Egypt from famine?
The Pharaoh had a dream, and I interpreted it for him, and it was that we'd have 7 years of good crops and then 7 years of famine. So we saved up crops for the 7 years of.
How did you feel after you reunited with your father and brothers?
Well, I felt happy that I knew that they were still alive.
Thank you, Joseph. If you traveled a lot, then you'll be especially interested in our next guest, Moses. Having led many people through the desert, he surely can give us some good tips on travel preparations. More than that, he can tell us about his conversations with Yahweh on Mount Sinai. Moses, God certainly led you to help your people. What was the most difficult part of freeing the people from slavery in Egypt?
It was difficult to lead the people out of slavery from Egypt because of the 10 plagues.
We know that the people faced many difficulties in the wilderness. Tell us about a few and how God helped the people.
Well, this kind of relates to the first question, kind of the 10 plagues too.
We have heard that the people were not always faithful. Can you give us a few examples?
They always complained and they were always moody.
What did God say to you on Mount Sinai?
He told me the 10 commandments.
Why did these commandments mean so much to you and your people?
They mean so much to me and my people because we are more confident and faithful.
How can we be faithful to God's commandments today?
We can be faithful to these commandments by following them.
Thank you, Moses. For those of you who like superstar stories, I am now happy to present two superheroes. First, I invite Joshua. Joshua led the chosen people into the promised land. Welcome, Joshua. Joshua, you've become quite a hero to many people. How did you lead the people into the promised land?
When I became leader, God spoke to me and he gave me instructions. And when we crossed over the Jordan River, then the water split for us, and then we went and waged war against the people of Canaan.
Can you tell us about your success at the Battle of Jericho?
Each day we marched around the city, and on the 7th day we marched around it 7 times, and then the walls fell. We quickly took the city. We could not have done it without God's help.
What were your parting words to the chosen people?
I reminded them of God's love for them and how he had given them Canaan, and I asked them which God they would serve. They answered the Lord, and then I sent them back to their own lands after renewing the covenant.
What advice can you give us about doing God's will?
Always trust in his guidance and follow him, and he will never abandon you.
Thank you, Joshua. Well, that was a fascinating story. Next, I invite Ruth, the Moabite, who was rewarded for her goodness in Israel. Ruth, you are famous in Jewish history, even though you are a foreigner. How did you become involved with Israel?
Well, I started to pick grade and then Boaz and the whole field knew me.
How were you a comfort and help to your mother-in-law, Naomi?
I know my mother-in-law Naomi, she told us all to leave her, to go to our hometowns, but I wouldn't leave her side.
How did God bless you?
God blessed me with food and a husband, Boaz.
Thank you, Ruth. We have several other companions of Israel with us today. Sadly, Gideon and Deborah got sick with the flu, so we have Samson with us today. He played an important part in protecting the chosen people. Samson, can you tell us more about life during those times? What was the promised land like after the death of Joshua? What were some of the Israelites' problems?
After Joshua died, the period of the judges started.
What were your duties as judges of Israel?
My duties as judge of Israel was to protect the people in combat.
We notice that the Israelites seem to make the same mistakes over and over. Can you tell us something about this pattern?
Well, this happened because the people of Israel kept disobeying God, and then they kept falling into idolatry.
What advice do you have for people who seem discouraged or those who keep repeating mistakes?
The people who are discouraged just need to keep trusting in God.
Thank you, Samson. It is my privilege to introduce to you a great man who heard God's call in the middle of the night. Let us listen to God's from Samuel, prophet and judge. Samuel, we often think of you as someone who listened to God's call. What happened on the night you heard God's call?
On that night, I heard a voice while I was sleeping, and I awoke and went to Eli, thinking that it was him calling me. He sent me back, stating that he didn't say my name. This happened a few more times, and then finally Eli realized that it was God calling me, so he told me to respond to the voice, saying, "Here I am, Lord, speak, for your servant is listening." And then God told me to tell Eli that his sons displeased the Lord.
What was your job as judge and prophet?
My job as judge was trying to heal the damaged and broken relationships the Israelites had with the Lord. As a judge, I was a great military leader and a great spiritual leader.
Why did you choose Saul as a leader? How did Saul eventually displease you?
God inspired me to anoint him as king. He was tall, courageous, and a good military leader. Unfortunately, Saul displeased me because he wouldn't listen to the messages I brought to him from the Lord. Instead, Saul did as he wanted, and eventually an evil spirit filled him.
Why did you anoint David a shepherd boy?
God told me to select the next king not based on appearances. As I went to the house of Jesse as God directed, the 7 sons he showed me, God did not choose one. David wasn't present at the time, so God declared him king in the fields.
Thank you, Samuel. Next we have with us the talented King David. This shepherd boy who became king has some very interesting stories to share with us today. David, we're glad you can take time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. How was it to you, a mere shepherd boy, were called on to anoint King Saul?
I was anointed by Samuel and I killed Goliath, so I kind of got popularity. And then when I played my harp for the king because he was angry, so I got his attention. But it was after the king died that I was made king.
How did you help Saul in his early years as king?
I played my harp for him, which calmed him because he was very angry and had anger issues. And I defeated Goliath, which was the enemy giant Philistine.
How did you feel towards Saul when he turned against you?
I was scared, so I ran away with help from Joshua.
What were some of the greatest things you did as king? What were some of your mistakes?
I united the people and I conquered many lands, which were very good things, but my sin was that I ordered Uriah to be killed in the front line so I could marry Bathsheba, his wife.
How can we serve God as loyal and true subjects?
You can trust and follow his laws and word.
Thank you, David. If you need some advice, you'll be interested in our next guest, Solomon. He is known and admired everywhere for his great wisdom. Solomon, we have heard some outstanding things about you as king. How did you come to be so full of wisdom?
God asked me for one wish, and that one wish was for wisdom.
What were some of your achievements?
I brought Israel great wealth and fame. I increased Israel's trade and military service, and I became king.
How did you misuse your wisdom?
I built temples for my pagan wives' idols, and soon after I began to worship foreign idols.
How would you suggest that we deepen our respect for the house of God and for one another?
Only worship the one and only God, and to respect one another, always put others before yourself.
Thank you, Solomon. in Good Morning Jerusalem.
Good morning, Jerusalem.